And thank you so much again, everyone, for joining us for this workshop on the Schwarzman Scholarship being organized by Project Edu Access. My name is Gayatri, and I'm going to be the moderator for today's workshop. On your screens, what you can see now is the outline for today's session. I'm going to kick things off by introducing Project Edu Access as well as your wonderful panelists to you. You may, in fact, be able to see the panelists on your screen at the moment. After that, I'm going to hand over to the speakers to share their insights into the Schwarzman Scholarship with all of you. So you'll be given a general overview about the scholarship process, what the eligibility criteria look like, what the application process is going to look like, what all application documents you're expected to put together, before you're also given some insights into the interview process. So after we get through this initial presentation, that's when we are going to open the floor for questions from you. Of course, as and when you get a question in your mind, you're more than welcome to drop those questions in the chat, but you're also welcome to just unmute yourself and ask your questions when we turn to the Q&A part of this workshop. Needless to say, this session is being recorded. So if you decide to unmute yourself, turn on your video and ask a question, you will also appear in the recording. So as long as you're fine with that, please just feel free to raise your hand and you will be given the floor to ask your questions. But if you're not too keen on appearing in the recording, please just drop your questions in the chat and I'll read them out to our panelists. I hope all of that is clear. So turning to just an introduction of what Project Edu Access does, we are a nonprofit initiative which seeks to improve inclusivity in particularly higher education spaces, but also more generally leadership and professional spaces by removing barriers for students and individuals coming from marginalized communities in the global South. There are a range of interventions that we adopt. The primary one is our mentorship program, which some of you may be familiar with. But apart from the mentorship program, we also regularly run workshops and seminars like the one that you're attending today, giving individuals more information and insights into the university application process, as well as the application process for specific scholarships like the Schwarzman. Apart from this, we also run in-person and online capacity building workshops and engage in some advocacy with universities, both abroad as well as the ones back home. So if you're interested in getting involved in work of this nature, please don't hesitate to contact us and ask how you can get involved. That being said, today we are gathered here for the workshop on the Schwarzman Scholarship, and we are joined by the wonderful Shivakshi and Noel, who are both Schwarzman scholars themselves who have pursued the MA in Global Affairs from Tsinghua University. Our speakers today, apart from English, are also familiar with Hindi, Bengali, and Nepali, as you can see on the screen. So just in case you're unable to articulate your questions in English and would like to ask your questions in any of these languages, please feel free to. The speakers will attempt to answer your questions in these other languages and will also attempt to translate them into English for the benefit of those who don't speak these languages. Having said that, I think now I will hand over to Noel and Shivakshi to take you through some insights into the Schwarzman Scholarship. Over to you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Gayatri, for organizing this. Welcome, everybody. So I'll be taking you through the overview and eligibility, the initial part of the presentation, and then I'll be handing it over to Noel to take you through the interview process and essays. I'm sure many of you might have already looked at the website, so I am going to go through it quickly. Please do mention your questions on the chat box. If I'm going too fast, please feel free to mention that. So scholarship, Schwarzman Scholarship, as we know, is an opportunity to pursue a one-year fully funded master's in global affairs at Tsinghua University in Beijing. Tsinghua University is also ranked first in Asia as an indispensable base for China's political, business, and technological leadership. The scholarship supports up to 140 to 150 scholars annually from US and China primarily, and then the rest is for the rest of the world. and is designed to build a global community of future leaders who will serve to deepen the understanding between China and the rest of the world. Scholars chosen for this highly selective program, of course, live in Beijing for a year of study and cultural immersion, which is a big part of the program, attending lectures, traveling around the region, developing a better understanding of China, and of course, forming long-lasting relationships. We can move to the next slide. In terms of eligibility is very straightforward in terms of you must have an undergraduate degree or be on a track to successfully complete all the degree requirements before August 1 of the Schwarzman Scholars enrollment year. Candidates must at least be 18, but not yet 29 years of age as of August 1 of the Schwarzman Scholars enrollment year for the class of 25 to 26 as of August 1, 2025. Applicants must demonstrate strong English language skills. Now, if the applicant's native language is not English, official English proficiency test scores must be submitted with the application. Though this requirement is waived off for applicants who studied at an undergraduate institution where the primary language of instruction was English for at least 2 years of the applicant's academic program. The requirement will also be waived off for applicants who have studied in English for 2 or more years at their master's degree level or higher. Now, the acceptable tests are TOEFL IBT, where the minimum score is 100, IELTS, where the minimum score is 7 throughout, and Cambridge English Advanced C1 or Cambridge English Proficiency C2 with the minimum score of 185. Next slide. In terms of requirements now, candidates who are most qualified to meet the high demands of the program must exhibit excellence in the following areas. Number 1 is leadership abilities, exemplary character and integrity, academic aptitude and intellectual ability, empathy and intercultural competency, open-mindedness, and entrepreneurial spirit. Regardless of an applicant's undergraduate degree or major, they need to articulate how participating in the Schwarzman will develop their leadership potential in their required field, because as we know, Schwarzman does not have a particular field of study that you need to come from in terms of eligibility. You might be a doctor, you might be a lawyer, you might be a social worker. It's open for everybody, or a golfer. It's open for everybody, but what you essentially need to show is your leadership potential and the other excellence areas. But you also need to be able to demonstrate how will Schwarzman add to your leadership potential in your respective field of study and work. In terms of application process, your personal information about me, we are going to go deeper into it as we go throughout the slides, but personal information about me, your education, language skills, leadership roles, your awards and recognitions that you have received, your professional experience, if you have had any, though it's not mandatory, your essays, your recommendation letters, and any kind of additional information that wasn't covered in the other parts of the application. This is the overview of the application process. Now, let's start with the personal information. Within your personal information, you need to provide your biographical and contact information. Second, you must list your legal name, nationality, gender, place of birth, date of birth, exactly as they appear or will appear on your passport. Now, one example would be, for example, if your passport has your surname that you no longer carry or wish to carry, if you have mentioned it in the Schwarzman application process, do make sure to change it in your passport as well when you apply for your visa. Now, you're also required to provide your current address, phone number, and your primary native language. And you may begin the application, of course, without having a passport, but the scholarship committee strongly advises having one before your application, as a valid passport is required for candidates admitted to Schwarzman Scholars, as you will be moving to China for the program. Next. Now, the second part of the application is about me. Now, about me starts with a biographical profile. The biographical profile, up to 100 words, summarizing your leadership accomplishments and future aspirations. A very short biographical profile, which you usually, if you go to the website, you'll see all the scholars have their biographical profiles over the years on the website. And this is a required field and should be written in third person and end with your country of citizenship. Now, what this means is, if I say Shivakshi is an entrepreneur, so and so, so I do not start with an I am. I start with third person saying Shivakshi is an entrepreneur / lawyer / whatever, and it needs to end with she is from India. So this is how the biographical profile looks like. Now, in terms of your resume and CV, you must upload your most recent CV, which should include your leadership experiences, your accomplishments, any professional experiences, education, anything that you wish to highlight, but the maximum limit is for 2 pages. Now, in terms of the video introduction, this is a question that I get asked a lot because it's not mandatory, but I think most scholars would definitely highly recommend it, though it's not required. If you are unable to submit a video though, make sure to give a brief explanation as to why you aren't being able to submit your video introduction. And it should not exceed 1 minute, so 60 seconds, and you need to provide a link. Google Drives are not allowed. Now, in terms of interests, you have to select up to 2 interests that best identify with your professional and leadership aspirations. And that's all. Next. Now, in terms of your education, you must provide details of undergrad and graduate degrees completed or on track to complete at the time of the application. You're also required to upload a transcript for each undergrad and graduate degree you attended. Your transcript must include your full name, institution name, and if applicable, the degree conferred and the conferral date. Do not list short-term study certificate programs or study abroad programs. These may be included in the resume instead, but not in your education field. And you also, it's mandatory to mention your grade point average, which is GPA. If your institution uses a numerical system, enter your cumulative GPA or other numerical score exactly as printed on your transcript. If your school does not use a numerical system, input 0 and enter the text description as indicated on your transcript. So which might be, for example, first class honors in the degree designation field. It's to keep in mind that academic excellence is an important component of the scholarship. So any information or context that you can provide to help the selection committee evaluate your educational experience is welcome. I'll just give an example in terms of if you have had, for example, a dip in your scores. In your additional information, that might be a space where you give an explanation as to why that happened, if there is a reason behind it. So that might be something to do in your application. Next. In terms of your language skills, you can list up to 3 additional languages and indicate your level of proficiency for each. If you have skills in more than 3 languages, list the 3 that you consider your strongest languages in terms of your fluency. And make sure that you list your native language on the personal information page rather than here. This is your additional languages. Next. Now let's come to leadership roles. This is again one of the most important parts of at least this part of the application, apart from the essays, which is the leadership roles, and the next section is awards and recognition. In terms of your leadership roles, you need to showcase up to 5 leadership roles that illustrate your demonstrated leadership experience to the selection committee. Each item, you'll find that within each item, there is a space for description and explanation of why the role is significant to your leadership profile, why are you adding it, and as well as your distinct contribution, outcome, or initiative. So many examples could be, and Gayatri has written it gracefully here with numerical indicators and clear deliverables of your listed activities, which means as data-centric, you, of course, there are qualitative examples as well. But if you are able to provide quantitative data in terms of the shift that you have been able to bring through that leadership role, that's very good because that's an evidence to your profile. Next. Now, below this, you'll find another section which asks for awards and recognitions. Now, these are any 5 awards, scholarships. Now, awards doesn't necessarily mean a tangible award that you're going up to the stage and getting. It can be varied, your named awards, scholarships, recognition, publications, any, for example, you have won an award for your research paper that you have published or in a conference. Those are all part of your awards and recognition. For each entry, again, the same as before, please include a concise explanation of why this activity was significant in your life and to your leadership profile. And again, what was your distinct contribution? What did you contribute? What was your outcome? Or what kind of initiative did you launch? Next. Yeah. Now, in terms of your professional experience, you can list up to 2 full-time work experience. If you are a student and have no full-time experience post your graduation, you're not required to complete this section. You can leave it empty. Having no full-time work experience will not affect badly in your application, and won't go against you as an applicant. If you are a young professional with full-time postgraduate work experience, select the category most relevant to your employment. Please make sure to not list any part-time work or internships or volunteer experiences, because this can be highlighted in your resume. Your full-time work or remote work where you have moved to, in the sense you have been working in more than one country or city, list the location where you spent most of the time in the position that you were working in. And again, same as before, you would be asked to provide a brief description of the role and your most notable accomplishments. Again, having data-centric accomplishments might be one of the ways to present your shift that you have been able to bring through your role. And select an experience category that best describes your professional experience as business, government, non-profit. So that's just the sector where you have been working at. For example, my sector can be non-profit and Noel's sector can be business. Just giving an example. So that's the category of work that you select for yourself. Next. I hand it over to Noel now.
Thanks, Shivakshi. I think you did a brilliant job covering it. So I'll rush to the next part. I think we can leave most of it for the Q&A to discuss it in more detail. So the essays and short answers, I would say that this is the heart of the application as a whole. Now you'll have a leadership essay and a statement of purpose. Leadership essay is basically to show who you really are, like where you're coming from, and and can you speak to your capabilities. On the other hand, the statement of purpose is going to be about why you're interested in the program and what really drives you to join the Schwarzman Scholarship. Now, besides this, it's going to be 2 short answer responses to analyze whether you're able to elucidate your ideas well, and if you're able to be articulate with what you're trying to say and convey. Now, they have to be submitted either as PDF or Word documents. And I think the end goal is to really help the committee understand who you truly are, because the process as a whole is quite short. If you can go to the next slide. Now, the leadership essay, as I said, is the heart of the whole application. And the idea is to address how you, and is to elucidate how you are a leader in a sense. And I would say one of the best ways to go about it is not to limit what you think is a leader. There are people who are going to be captains in a navy, or they can be people who are simply interning in an NGO. But leadership would include and mean initiating projects, taking charge, and so on. So let out your genuine, authentic self, express yourself truly as to who you are, and don't limit yourself to the established ideas of what leadership qualifies as. Yeah, and we can go to the next one. Okay, some things to avoid in the leadership essay, and I've come across a couple of things and across many applications that I've seen. One is, do not make the whole application about your single topic or the single issue that you dealt with. Um, Ideally, you should be following the STAR formula, that is a situation, task, action, and result. But when you're doing this, be careful to not over explain it. Number one. Number two, as I mentioned earlier, don't limit yourself to what you think should be a leader. The idea of leadership in the Schwarzman program is quite large, and you will realize this when you meet the people from them. They're coming from all kinds of backgrounds. Next, do not ensure that you're talking about small irregularities or small issues that came up in your project. So, for example, a simple issue of cultural miscommunication and solving it is not a form of leadership. On the other hand, you shouldn't even be focusing on things that are extremely long term. You should be able to observe changes and assess the outcome of that particular leadership. Uh, so basically, choose an action that is not too trivial. At the same time, it's not shouldn't be too long term of a goal. Next. Okay, the statement of purpose. Um, I would say the statement of purpose is actually a mix of 3 things. One is obviously your own professional interest and goals. Number two, how they relate to the world, this contemporary affairs, international relations to some extent. And finally, how it relates to your desire to visit China and see China. But at the end of the day, the program is designed to help you explore this country. And what the selection committee really wants to know is to see whether you're passionate about these three things. And if your statement of purpose can address these three things, then perfect. Then it's a great statement of purpose. Um, do not try to emulate a certain model for a statement of purpose. As I mentioned before, it has to speak to who you are, and they're trying to assess your genuine self. Um, Furthermore, don't make it a repeat of your CV. They know that they already have your CV, so you don't need to explain to them what you did. But what you need to tell them is how what you did builds upon your desire to do the Schwarzman program, or builds upon your desire to visit China, to study China, um, or simply to understand international relations better. That should be the crux of the statement of purpose and not a summary of your CV. You can go to the next slide, please. Okay. The short answer questions, if I'm not mistaken, they change every year. So no one can actually give you a fixed answer to how to answer them. And that's for a reason. And the idea is to see whether you can elucidate yourself and articulate yourself really well. The question is going to be such where there is no clear cut, straightforward answer to it. And you're supposed to come up with an answer that best describes the situation. Um, and now I know it's only 100 words. You might think it's not that tough, but having smaller space to write about something makes it even more tougher because now you have to articulate yourself, keep yourself brief and concise. So there's no real space for jargon. And I would say in this particular case, since you're trying to convey who you are and try to articulate yourself better, be informal and keep your personal interests in mind. Again, do not repeat things that you've already covered in your statement of purpose or your leadership essay. Um, I'll reiterate again that the whole process is actually quite short. There's the application, there's the interview, and then there's the selection, right? So don't waste space and don't waste words trying to repeat things. They're quite precious in this application because you're trying to convey to a panel of specialists about a person whom they've never met before that this person is worth joining the Schwarzman program. Next slide, please. Okay, so I think the recommendation letter is maybe not the best understood part of the whole the application process. So one obviously has to be an academic letter from a professor who can speak to your academic abilities. Number two, you'll need one that can speak to your leadership abilities. And the third one, I would say, is quite important because this person needs to speak to who you are, your potential, what you're capable of, and how you can contribute to the program. I think, and what makes a Schwarzman Scholar quite distinct from other programs is that you will have people coming with recommendation letters from, I've heard from ex-presidents, like sitting presidents, prime ministers, and they haven't been selected. And that's because their recommendation letter did not really speak to who they are as a person. It does not matter if your professor is not a well-renowned scientist or a voice or a leader. It matters whether this person has taught you, has had great interactions with you, and knows you deeply. Same thing for the leadership letter recommendation too. It must be somebody you've worked very closely with, that you've had really good, I would say, professional connections with. Um, and do not make the mistake of writing the recommendation letter for your recommenders. I think what happens is you end up creating a very homogeneous language, and the selection panel knows that it's been written by you. And obviously, general rule of thumb: do not choose your family members to be your recommenders. Not the best idea. If you can go to the next slide, please. Yeah. I think we can come to this later in the Q&A. You can go to the next slide. Yep. So the interviews, so if I'm not mistaken, both Shivakshi and I had online interviews. I think Shivakshi was the COVID batch, and I was the last batch to have the online interview. So we couldn't really visit, I think, Singapore or London for that matter. But I think the interviews, there's a second stage of the application process is I wouldn't say it's tough, but I think they really come to know the potential of the candidate. It's the best way. It's a 20-25 minute long round, and depending on how you do with public appearances, it's going to feel like an hour. But I think the interview is a great way to get to know you. And the questions can vary from personal questions to professional questions to ask, and we'll ask you one question about a certain scientific topic or any topic that you're interested in. And this topic might not be what you actually researched on. So, for example, they asked me a question on artificial intelligence, and I had no idea about the artificial intelligence policy. But what they're trying to gauge is not about how correct your answer is, but how impromptu you are and how quick you are on your feet when you're answering these questions. This is the best way to really get to know somebody. Um, Now, of course, as you can see, the interviews take place between October 29th and November 27th, and you'll have to choose a certain place for the interview. I think earlier there used to be 3 locations, but now I believe it's only New York. Um, and of course, and I think the best part of this is they actually cover the cost of the interview to fly to the interview and stay there. So even if you don't make it past the interview stage, I mean, have a good trip. I think it's totally worth it. And really, and don't think of the interview as a challenge. It's not a test, and there's no right way to answer an interview. The variety of people they're accepting is really, really vast and very varied, as Shivakshi mentioned. Okay, if you can go to the next slide. Yeah, so as I mentioned, the panel will be 5 to 6 members and really high-profile figures. I've had ex-prime ministers, ex-ministers, presidents, professors of really esteemed universities, but do not feel quite worried about what they're going to think, how you're answering, because they know that you're young, you just graduated and you've come for this program. So, and they've done this multiple times, so don't worry too much about it, and don't lose your cool. In the 25 minutes, as I mentioned, you get a minute to introduce yourself, your background, your professional interest, and this is really important. You need to summarize yourself in a minute, so I think practice that. The panel questions will mostly pertain to your CV and your application. The conversations will definitely cover things that are not in your introduction or in any of your applications. And then, as I mentioned, at the 20-minute mark, you'll have a randomly selected topic from current affairs, and they will ask you a question that you might not have any idea about. Again, the idea is not to test you on knowledge, but to see how you elucidate and articulate yourself. And the interview gets over quite quickly in 25 minutes. Even if you think you have messed up, my personal advice would be uh, don't lose your cool. I messed up my interview, and that turned out just fine, because they know where you're coming from. They know you're really young. You're starting out as professionals. Some of you might have just graduated from bachelor's, and they've been doing this for about, I think, 10 years now. So don't worry too much about it. And of course, I think Project Edu Access is doing a great job. So they'll organize the mock interviews, which I think is really important. I think, and one thing that I forgot to mention at the previous stage was when you're writing your leadership essays and your statement of purpose, do not hesitate to create multiple drafts of the same thing. It's only 500 and 700 words, but those 700 words and 500 words need to really convey who you are. Just to share my own personal experience, the final draft of my leadership essay and statement of purpose, I wrote it 12 hours before actually submitting it, and it is completely different from the original draft. Um, and I did plenty of mock interviews before actually appearing for the interview. So just keep that in mind. Okay, if you can go to the next slide, please. Okay, the most important part of the application, uh, the entire application is important. Focus on every single thing. This is not, again, this is not a test. They are not looking, if you have not done anything that one would consider as traditional leadership, do not worry about it. If you don't have a great GPA, as mentioned, you don't have to worry about it. I didn't have a great GPA. I think what they're really looking for, and this is very unique to the Schwarzman program, is they are not looking for great, bright scholars. What they're really looking at people who have a sense of current affairs, are holistic in their approach, and are ready to learn. That's what they're really looking for. And my interaction with Schwarzman scholars show that, like, some of them are absolutely, they're not specialists in anything. They're just fresh out of bachelor's. Many of them do not have the leadership experience that we traditionally consider leadership experience. But what they do have is the ability to learn, absorb knowledge really fast, and they're not hesitant to improve themselves or to adopt a new skill, adopt a new approach, and that's what they're really looking for. So do not treat it again as an exam. And every part of the application is important. Keep it personal, keep it relevant, and keep it crisp. Okay, can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah. So again, general tips, and I think we can discuss this further in the Q&A. Three things you need to focus on: why you are a leader, why global affairs, why China, and your application must have the undercurrent of these three things. Next, recommenders should address aspects of your personality: academic, professional, and intrinsically why you're doing this program, what interests you in it, and it should speak on your behalf and attest to your skills. And finally, the video. And I think this is the best part of the Schwarzman application. You get to do whatever you want in the video. I don't know what you did, Shivakshi, but I wrote a poem about myself, and I recited it in Lodhi Garden. I recorded it there. And the first opening line of the interview was, "We saw your video and we found it hilarious." Not what I was expecting, but it worked out. It worked well. It gave them a good laugh. So we keep the video light. I would not recommend making it a chat with yourself on a laptop screen. Keep it interesting. I know people who have danced. They've done rap songs. They have done, I think, horse riding on it. They've done some really weird things on the video, and so do not hesitate at all. If you want to wear a costume, go ahead, do that. So yeah, I think that's about it from my side. We can take a couple of questions now.
Perfect. Thank you so much, both. The video highlight seems to be the highlight of the application process itself. That sounds like a lot of fun. Like I mentioned earlier, everyone, if you are comfortable appearing in the video that'll go up on our YouTube channel, please don't hesitate to just raise your hand. You can unmute yourself and ask whatever questions you had, but you're also equally welcome to drop your questions in the chat. So in the meantime, let me just quickly pin the videos of the speakers to your screens. So everything looks pretty in the recording as well subsequently. I don't see any questions or raised hands yet. So Shivakshi, I was wondering if you wanted to share anything about your video. Noel's video is clearly very interesting.
No, that is hilarious. So for me, my application process, so I submitted it, and I do not recommend anybody doing what I did in my application. So my application was submitted at 7 a.m. in the morning, and I think 9 a.m. was the deadline. And so my video that was taken was at 4 a.m. when I was dying and sleepy, and I just could not go through with the application anymore. And that's why I know that there are two extremes, right? Noel put like massive effort into it, and I just, with my droopy eyes, I just finished the interview in like one take and I submitted it. And I was just thinking, I'll not even get through it, just let's get it done. So that was my interview. Sorry, that was my video interview. And my interview, I was in Bangladesh during the time I was working there. So my video was frozen. So I did not know whether they are able to hear me, and they didn't know whether I'm speaking. So it was 25 minutes of grilling. But for me, 25 minutes went by very fast because I was just saying, pardon me, I cannot hear you. Can you hear me? So that a lot of time was wasted there, but it worked out. So yes. And
Right.
Noel, they asked me a question on Saudi's some financial policy. I'm a human rights
Wow.
lawyer with absolute no idea about finances at all, and they knew it.
Yeah.
So, and I think Noel summarized it very well. What they see is not whether you're able to answer it. It's one is, of course, how articulate you are, but the other one that I would just add here, because at Schwarzman, you will be interacting with ambassadors and people from various backgrounds, right? How confident you
Yeah.
are without getting intimidated and threatened, how confident you are to just walk up to them and talk. So this question, because you'll be interacting probably with a golfer comes to my mind, I don't know why, but a golfer and various kinds of fields that you might not have any awareness about. So it's just that interaction also tells a lot about your personality. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right about speaking to important people. I think confidence is what really matters. Like you could be a bright A plus student, but be unable to have any public speaking skills, and that's not really the sign of leadership, you know.
Yeah.
And that's what the Schwarzman program is really looking for.
Perfect. I think now people have warmed up to the idea of asking questions. So I've received one by DM that says, can you please elaborate on the complete all required degree requirements part? Since I just graduated and for my original degree certificate, it will take time. But in the meantime, I can get my provisional degree certificate. Is that enough for me to submit the application?
No, yes, it is enough for the application, yes. But one needs to make sure that you're communicating after submitting your application or even before you're communicating it, that to the admissions team first. Second, once you reach there, as soon as you reach there, you will be required for your city registration, like your registration as well in the Tsinghua University, you will be required to have your transcripts ready. If by any chance you do not have it ready, you will have to have it ready by then. So yes.
Perfect. Someone probably missed the initial bits of the workshop. So they're asking, is it mandatory to provide IELTS scores?
No, it's
No,
not.
yeah.
Please go
No,
ahead.
just no, absolutely not. If you've done your I think your education in English, I think for at least 2 years, then you don't need to have it. And by education, I mean your bachelor's. Yeah.
What will help though, if your university can provide, so for example, my university provided an English waiver certificate, which essentially means that your university vouches on their logo certificate that or a letterhead that you have your degree has been conferred and your language of instruction and assessments were in English. So in any case, for any application, usually that has been taken as a valid waiver.
Perfect. Thank you. Romesa, I think you had your hand raised for a bit there. Did you want to ask a question? Okay, probably not. But in the meantime, we can get through some of the questions in the chat. Thanks a lot for the comprehensive session. Is there any prior basic knowledge in Mandarin required before applying?
No, absolutely not. I think that's the great thing about the Schwarzman program, um, is that you do not need Mandarin. And I think on this note, I'd like to introduce I think the Yenching program too. That's something that people can actually look to. Very few Indian applicants for the Yenching program. Great program, 2 years course, but you need to have an idea of Mandarin. So yeah, but for the Schwarzman program, you do not need it.
Perfect. My question is whether there is any recommended structure for the leadership essay. If not, what structure did you yourselves adopt? Is there anything that you would recommend to the applicants this year?
Noel, please take it ahead if you want to.
So, I think I'll just add that there's no real structure to it. Just stick to elucidating and articulating yourself really well. And don't be too worried about does this fit the form of the structure of the application. Like, don't really worry about. Just be yourself. I think yeah, that's about it. I think Shivakshi.
Completely resonate with you. Leadership essay particularly does not need to have any structure. It is you and your journey. So your SOP, there are two parts, right? And often I get this question that SOP mein kya aana? Yeah, what constitutes in the SOP and what part of it would become turn into the leadership essay. Leadership essay is particularly around, you can choose, for example, any particular experience or 2-3 experiences together where your leadership potential has grown and there's a journey of leadership that I can see as a third person who has never met you. So it's essentially your leadership journey, and SOP is your journey of your professional and personal development journey. So that's how you can divide the both.
Excellent. There are quite a few people who are curious to hear more about the course itself, the MA in Global Affairs. Is there any thesis or dissertation requirement at the end of the course? What kind of
Yes.
modules are taught on the course? Any insights into that?
I'll go first. So I think the program itself is not academically challenging. And at the end of the day, it's not supposed to be an academically challenging program. It's very simple. You do have to write a capstone. It's called a capstone. It's pretty short. It's about half the size of a normal thesis, about 50 pages long. Um, but what the capstone does is it allows you to research on any topic you like, and it doesn't have to be international affairs. I know people who have researched on the tradition of eating ducks in Southeast Asia. That has been a capstone. So you can do anything you want. Um, with regards to the rest of the program, you get to choose courses. You get to choose courses both in Tsinghua University and in the Schwarzman College. And these courses are not academically challenging. You will not be You'll not be tested in the same way you're tested in India. It's very American style. You write a couple of essays, you get scores for that, and almost everybody will end up with a 4 GPA. I can assure you that much. But where it does get challenging is if you can put yourself if you can test yourself, and basically it Schwarzman Scholars Program is about as good as you make it. If you want to test yourself, it's up to you. You can take up the most challenging course in Tsinghua University. There are moments when kind of regretted taking a course because I thought it's too challenging, but it paid off. And I think that is epidemiology. As a lawyer and international relations student, I had no idea what epidemiology statistics had to do with it, but ended up taking that. And so my point is that it's as challenging as you make it to be. And the program's end goal is not to give you a great education about international affairs and all of that, which you will kind of get on the way. But it's mostly about networking, getting to know the world, getting to meet people that you would never have imagined meeting. I remember within I think the first 3 weeks, we met Tony Blair. A couple of days later, we met the ambassador of Mexico. Um, our professor was a three-star US general, ambassador to Afghanistan, ambassador to Saudi Arabia, deputy Attorney Secretary General of the UN. This is what the Schwarzman program is about. It's not academics. It's about making what you want it to be.
Perfect. Shivakshi, did you want to add something?
No, I think Noel summarized it very well. So.
Perfect. There's someone who's saying, would you recommend this degree to someone who wants to pursue public policy? How reputed is the degree itself in comparison to other institutions in the West?
Okay, I can take the question, and Noel, you can add to that.
Yeah.
This has been widely asked, even in terms of like an MBA versus Schwarzman program. I don't think there's a point of comparison here. If you want degree and knowledge, then I would recommend you pursuing a Chevening scholarship or any other other scholarships. It depends on what your outcome is. In terms of the scholarship, it's obviously one of the most reputed scholarships. But if public policy, particularly policy, is your area of work, and you want to learn statistics, you want to learn aspects of policy, then this might not be the program. However, if you want to interact with policymakers, have more conversations, my hunch is that you might end up with the best internship in a public policy firm or a job in a public policy firm through this Schwarzman program. But for knowledge, I don't think this is the program. Though there are electives that you can choose in the program, but those electives, because most of the courses, actually there are only 3 to 4 mandatory courses. Other courses you choose on the basis of your interest areas. And there are some policy related courses, at least there were in my time. And those courses will only give you like an overview 3-week, but it would be taught by a person who you can network or have as your thesis, a capstone advisor. So again, I think repeating what Noel said, you make it what you want. If you want a degree conferring very strong knowledge in a subject area and want to go deeper, because this is more of an breadth degree. If you want to go deeper into an area, then you might want to consider other scholarships. Noel, anything to add?
Yeah, I'll just say that from my own personal experience, before being accepted to the Schwarzman Scholarship, I was very close to actually taking up an MBA. And I think if you're looking for future job prospects, if you don't really want to play the long game in a way, MBA is a better option, or pursuing a master's in your own field is a better option. The Schwarzman Scholarship is not, again, it's not for academics. But there's some exceptions to this. I would say that if you, in the end of the day, you're going to work, if you're trying to work for some big consultancy firm, or if you're trying to work outside of India in the US or EU or even China, the Schwarzman program is amazing for that. Because the moment they see Tsinghua University, I think most Indians, I personally was not aware of it. Most people don't know haven't even heard of Tsinghua University, even though it's the world's, I think, 13th top ranked university and first in Asia. um, Most Indians haven't heard of it. So when I send my job applications, they usually think it's some random Chinese university where I went because I couldn't afford a medical seat in India. That's usually the idea of Chinese universities. So that's a problem. So if you're applying for jobs in India, definitely going to be a problem to find a job later. Um, the Schwarzman Scholarship is actually very, very prestigious in the US. I had no clue until I actually went there. Very prestigious, like at par with Harvard, I would say, perhaps. And so if you apply for a job in the US, you'll be the top candidate there. And the 4 GP is going to look amazing. Um, but in India, it's not going to work out. People haven't heard of the Schwarzman program. People haven't heard of Tsinghua University, and the skill sets you're going to gain is not really that much. Like it's not really that intensive. If you take up a course on disarmament, you'll just get the the most brief overview that you can get on Wikipedia too. But what's going to be great is that the professor is going to teach you disarmament is going to be an amazing contact to have, because she's probably worked 25 years in the UN. She's interacted with more leaders than most of us combined have. And when you approach her for a letter of recommendation, or if you approach her for career advice or just for networking, it's going to be an amazing contact to have. Um, and I think it's also a sacrifice to make. The 1 year you spend in China, you're sacrificing a year of an MBA. You're sacrificing a year of employment that's going to be up on your CV as work experience. What you're going to gain is a view into China that I think very few people have. Even if the stuff we see as a Schwarzman scholar, even I think most Chinese people have not seen it. Like visiting Tesla's factory, for example, in Shanghai, is something Chinese scholars, PhD scholars, do not get the opportunity of. You get to go to the National Assembly of a Chinese province. Most Chinese people will never see that in their entire lives, but you will get to do that because you're a Schwarzman scholar. Yeah, you will see parts of China that most foreigners haven't gone to: Tibet, Xinjiang, Inner Mongolia. So yeah, so these are things that you have to like. It's a lot about balancing your own professional and personal needs. So it's not for everyone, and I think choose depending on where you are currently in your life.
Excellent. Thank you for the very, very honest advice, both of you. We have a few questions about the leadership essay. One of the attendees is saying, I want to mention the evolution of my idea of leadership, which includes 2 to 3 examples, but the prompt specifically asks only for one example. So what would you suggest in this case? Others are asking if you would be comfortable sharing what kinds of examples you mentioned in your leadership essay. So any thoughts?
Shivakshi?
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, if I understood it correctly, one question was on
How many
okay, yeah,
examples can you?
examples. Okay. I don't remember what I'd done exactly in my essay because I'm also, it's been 3 years. But I do remember though that I did not mention one story, because often what happens is if they're asking for one experience, now how I interpreted it in my essay, leadership essay, was one experience led to the other. For example, I'll just give an example as you asked for. So I'm a social entrepreneur. So I've started 2 organizations, but one led to other. And so from Hunkar Foundation to the Lali project. So, but overall, both of them were on child sexual abuse and menstrual health fellowship. So both of them were on gender, you can call it sexual and reproductive health rights, as well as child rights, right? But you can overall put it in under one umbrella. But I would not have done justice only mentioning one experience, because my other experience is connected to this and shows my evolution of leadership there. So I had mentioned it as a connecting story. You can choose according to your story. It cannot be, what I'll do recommend is, it cannot be two very distinct examples. If you want to mention it together, it should come out as one story of your leadership. So yeah, Noel.
Yeah, I think Shivakshi put it really well. Like, do not stick to just one story. It kind of has to connect to the other stuff you've done. So I'll just give you a very brief example of what my leadership essay was. It was actually about how I failed to do something. So I was starting a project in Andhra Pradesh for tribal communities, and it failed. And that was my story. Okay, I tried and it failed. That was the leadership story, and I connected it to how when I was in college, I had started some couple of initiatives and stuff, and that kind of built up on my desire to work with communities on the ground and stuff, and so that connects to your larger story. So at least have two sub stories going on that kind of connect to the larger leadership story that you have. And then I would say definitely follow the star method. I think kind of people lose the narrative when you don't use the star method. Stick to that. So yeah, that's about it, I think. But Shivakshi like really elucidated it really concisely.
Just one thing to add was, if anybody missed, Noel mentioned, if you remember, acknowledging his failure. I think that is another very important aspect. I wouldn't say for the application, but generally all applications, especially scholarships, because somebody is putting in their resources to get you to that country or get you to the university. And I think, one of the major principles of leadership is acknowledging your failure and how you grew from it. And if you can kind of elucidate that in your application, and what I often say is being humble, but strategically humble, which means that when you are, so this is a question I get asked, that how do I have to be a victim to write my application, right? So this victim sob story that needs to come across in the application, and we have often seen many examples of it. Absolutely not. You have to be authentic and acknowledge your failures and how you grew for it from it, and any kind of course, any kind of discrimination if you have had, and uh, acknowledging it in the application, because it's might not have to acknowledge the discrimination per se, but be as authentic as you are in terms of your journey of life, and that's the crux of your application.
That's phenomenal advice for all applications. So anyone who's on this grad school journey, please remember what Shivakshi and Noel have just said. We have several questions on the LOR requirement, and some of these border on the more general side of things and may not be specific, but I'm going to read all of them out. So there are some who are a little worried because their professors are not keen on drafting the LORs themselves and have already delegated the job to them. So how do we approach such a situation? What can we do about this is one major concern. Secondly, there's someone who's asking if you have any insights into how they can get an academic letter if they have already, if it's been a few years since they have already left their university of undergraduate education. And a third question is it okay to ask for a recommendation from a professor of a different college, as long as I have some sort of an acquaintance with this person and they are part of the same academic or research group? Would that be enough for an academic letter? Let's start there. There are more questions, but I'll get to them in a bit.
Yeah. I think I'll go first, and then Shivakshi can add. Could you repeat the first question again?
I believe the first one was, what do you do if you've been asked to write the LOR yourself?
Oh yeah, of course, the most important one. Try not to write it yourself would be the best answer. Um, I mean, it's understandable. I think it's very common, at least in India, it's very common for you to be writing your own LOR. I would not recommend it, but if you are, like, keep in mind that it's supposed to reflect who you are. Don't turn yourself into Superman. Keep it honest. That'd be one. I think second, if you're not able to, even if you're out of college for a couple of years and you can't find your professor, I'm sure you can get in touch with the professor and be like, hey, would you write an LOR for me? They most likely will not say no. So it doesn't matter if it's been many years. And I think finally, if I get the third question, like once again.
The third question is, it seems like they have not been taught by this particular person, but they're part of the same academic or research group, and they're from a different college, not the college that they went to for their undergraduate degree.
Right. I think best not to, but depends on the level of interaction and depends on the group and the project. But ideally, I would not recommend it. I think what they're trying to look for is you as a student, because the program is obviously designed for recent graduates. So if you've been working on a project, that's good. It's good for the leadership essay, but I wouldn't recommend getting a letter from there.
Shivakshi, do you want to add anything?
No, I think Noel summarized it all
Yeah.
very well.
Excellent. So if I could just add a point on writing your own LORs, instead of doing it yourself, I think it's always a good idea to ask your friend to write it, but especially if, multiple people are asking you to write your LORs on your own, you may be writing them in the same voice, in the same style, which is always a dead giveaway, right? So it's never a bad idea to ask a friend, just maybe give them some pointers, maybe send them your CV and ask them to be the recommender, and draft something. And then, of course, you can always go over it and make any edits if you think that is necessary. But yeah, it's never a bad idea to delegate the job to your friend. Just one more question on the recommendation letters. I understand it is ideal to start writing to our recommenders as early as possible, but considering that the application is due on the 12th of September, what course of action can I take if I want to apply for the Schwarzman Scholarship this year? Is it too late for me to apply now?
No, okay, I can take it, and then Noel, you can add. No, as I mentioned, so I started the application on the very last day and I submitted the application, though I do not recommend it at all. You still have 12 days to go. If you have your SOP and at least your master SOP, I'm not saying that it has been broken down into leadership essays, but if you have been planning to go abroad, then you might have an overall SOP ready of 1500 words maybe. And even if you don't, writing SOPs, making multiple drafts, because you're writing about your own life. And if you're starting it right now, I would recommend, and I've always recommended this, do not stick to the Schwarzman application right now if you have less amount of time. Write a master SOP of 1500 words, because usually it's easier to write longer essays than breaking it down, and then break it down for the Schwarzman application. Would be my recommendation. Again, this is my personal opinion. Next is, in terms of your recommender, reach out to your recommender today, if possible. And if you have a connect, ask the recommender if they would want to write the LOR, or give, because I don't know, this is a public forum if I'm even supposed to say this, but so you give an option yourself, because you just have 12 days. You can't wait for it. Usually our recommenders are very busy, or academic people or professionals. So just mention in a way that would you want me to give you an outline of the application of the LOR and my CV, so that it's easier for you to write. There are two options here. Either they'll say yes, or they'll be like, can you write it for me and send it to me? I'll edit it. Then the locus of control is in your hands. So that way you'll be able to finish your application within the given time period. Also make sure that your LOR, whenever, and Gayatri mentioned a good point, you can ask your friend to do it, because often if you're writing three LORs for yourself or two LORs, the language, even your bragging seems to be the same, right, in the three LORs. So what you essentially need to do is, when you're making an outline, make sure that each LOR is significantly different and catering to a different part of the application or your CV. So, but overall theme needs to be your growth, whether an academic growth or your leadership growth or your personal professional growth. Also, one more recommendation would be, make it as personal as possible. When I say personal, it means that, as Noel suggested, right, it's always better to ask a recommender who has had very personal interactions with you, in terms of who has seen your journey and your growth. So when you make the LOR not a copy paste LOR that we find on the internet, but it's very personal to you and your journey and their interactions with you, it's brilliant. That's what they see in the application. So yes, please go ahead, Gayatri. Noel.
Yeah, I'll just add one thing very briefly. It's
Yeah.
it's never too late to apply, but obviously when you apply immediately in haste, the quality of it is going to suffer. And I think on this note, I'd like to share what I personally believe. There are exceptions to this, but for applicants not coming from the US, they generally tend to expect more work experience. So if you're coming from India or Africa or anywhere else, you're going to have about ideally should have about a year or 2 years of experience. And so if you think that you're going to be late with this year's application, apply next year. It's going to work in your favor, so don't worry about it. uh, and obviously if the where you have a will, there's a way. So if you really want to do it in 5 days too, or even 2 days, you can do it. um and with the letter of recommendation, I would recommend what I would recommend would be, if you in case you haven't noticed, in the letter of recommendation part, your recommender sends the recommendation letter from their own email ID. You can't send it on their behalf. So just remember that when you send your letter of recommendation to your recommender, like obviously after you've done your own edits, they should be actually sending it. In case they forget, then it's going to be your loss. And I don't quite remember very clearly, but you don't get a confirmation. I'm not sure, maybe you do, I'm not sure that, but please do hound your recommender to confirm that they have sent it. I know people whose recommenders have failed to send the recommendation letter from their behalf, and it hasn't worked out. So do be careful of that.
On that point, Noel, there's a related question. Is the deadline for the recommenders to upload the LORs different from the application deadline? Do they get more time?
I'm not sure, but I think during my time I think there was some exception to this. If you can provide an
Yeah,
exception to why they can't send, yeah, Shivakshi.
I think the same. I don't remember exactly. It's best that we don't give you this information right now.
Yes.
I'm not sure. Yeah, you can go through the website. The website is very descriptive. Would
Yeah.
have this information definitely, or the FAQ section.
Perfect. And just a related question on the application process. Is there any application fee?
No.
No. Perfect.
That was the
Um,
reason I applied. No application fee.
Just a few final questions before we wrap up. One of our attendees is saying, how to handle the question in interviews when we are asked why we chose a certain degree in the respective discipline. Can we put forward personal and emotional reasons, or does it have to be just about the professional and career goals?
Shivakshi?
Yes. No, absolutely no. It, see, the objective there when you are there giving an interview is to get to know you more, not to reject you. So the point is to be as authentic as possible. So which means um, strategically being honest. And if you think that your reason, for example, I'll give you an example of my story. I took my 11th and 12th were in so I had taken physics, maths, biology, and so I was a PCMB student, as we call it, right, in my times. And but I did not pursue it later. I went through a degree in law because that's what I wanted to do it. But I come from a family of doctors. Now this is my reason, and I gave this reason to them that I because this is one of, I wouldn't say my pain points, but I also did what I wanted to do because I had certain struggles with my courses that I had taken up, and it just gave me more determination to do what I did later. So you have to be very honest. For example, because you will see in Schwarzman, people are studying international relations, but they are coming from pharmaceutical backgrounds, or nurses, or military people, or military nurses. So there are various kind of people coming into the program and doing a common program called Global Affairs, which is essentially, I wouldn't say it's international relations, but part of international relations, right? An umbrella term. And yes, so please be honest and authentic. Noel.
Uh, yeah, I would say absolutely. Like, if it's going to be a funny reason, like, say, just be honest with that reason. I told them I wasn't great at mathematics or science, even though I was a PCM student, so I ended up doing law. That was my honest reason, and it really is the reason why I did law. Yeah, but if you can back it up with a professional reason, then definitely do that. It's going to help you out. So in my case, I told them, listen, I wasn't good at mathematics, I wasn't good at science, not the best at rote learning. So I ended up doing what I really like, and that was law, because it's logical for me at least. And I told them this. So I think it just sticks to that. I think Shivakshi really summarized it really well. Like, you're going to have people from all kinds of backgrounds studying this degree called global affairs. Honestly, never heard of this degree called global affairs in my life. What is it? What is even global affairs? But I would like to highlight that you also do get a master of management science in yeah, you get a master of management science from Tsinghua University. Um, and the reason you do get that is because one of the programs in Schwarzman is called Lingdaoli, which translates to leadership. And the English translation of this Chinese term is actually Masters of Management Science. So you can also call it a management degree in a way. If you want to market it that way, you can do that. Easy shortcut to a management degree. And I think a great vacation in China too.
Absolutely. And it's also allowed to write it that way in terms of management.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Just a few more questions. There is some curiosity among attendees as to whether in your statement of purpose and leadership essay, you're expected to sort of toe the line with Chinese foreign policy or any specific human rights issues, or is it okay for you to flag them in the essays? Any insights into that? Any personal experiences to share?
I'll go first, and I think Shivakshi can follow. I think with this, so I think you need to realize that the program actually is based out of the United States, number one. So the people interviewing are not most likely not going to be Chinese. Number two, Schwarzman's College is actually what's considered as a special education zone. This basically means that Chinese law on academia doesn't apply as it does on actual Chinese colleges. So Schwarzman's College is almost like an American college on Chinese soil. You are very free to discuss any kind of questions, LGBTQ questions. You want to talk about dissidents in Xinjiang, free to talk about that. Dissidents in Tibet, free to talk about it. I mean, the college library itself has books which are banned in China. So that tells you a lot about the program itself. It's a special education zone. Feel free to talk about whatever you think are important issues, regardless of censorship. But I would recommend one thing, and I think this is definitely a case across the world, and I think even in India, there is some sensationalization about Chinese stuff, right? They often some myths, okay, like so and so things happen in China, or LGBTQ groups are persecuted and all. I think some of it is not true. You'll when you actually go to China, you'll be very surprised about how liberal Chinese society actually is compared to our own society in a democracy. So yeah, feel free to talk about it, but also if you're going to make a claim about China and about its political system, back it up with facts. It should not be based out of thin air or about something what someone told you. So yeah, but feel free to go ahead with your views on China.
Perfect. If Shivakshi, you don't have anything to add, then I'm gonna put the final set of questions to you. So we seem to have a few attendees who have already finished a master's. One seems to have done it in ecology, environment, and sustainable development, and another seems to have done it in political science. They're wondering if it's worth doing a second master's and how that might add value to their profiles.
Okay. Very quickly, you will find your classmates. So I think 6 of my classmates were already PhDs. They were doctorates, right? They came here. So, and as I said, MDs were there. So doctors who had done their masters, they were there. LLMs were there. I will be pursuing my second master's after my law now. So, again, what Noel said initially, it depends on where you are in life and what you want to do. Can you afford to take a break here? Do you want to, I think, take this opportunity up in China? And what's your goal in life now? And if you want to, so for me, for example, it was very fruitful. Reason being, not because of academics at all. I never, because I went during the zero COVID times there. I'm not saying it was very positive in terms of what I went through, but what I went through led me to imagine my own potential, and in the sense to reimagine my own potential and the kind of people that I was meeting. And it gives you so much exclusive access. And coming from India and have studied in India before, the kind of, I think, attention and exclusivity of what Noel said, right? Access you get into Chinese political system, you shadowing people, you interacting like equals with the ambassadors. That's the opportunity I cherish. And I would say that was the highlight of my program, and that's why I did my master's there. And uh, currently in this era of times, again, depends on a lot of privilege, also depends on access and other opportunities that you want to lose or take. People are doing 3 masters as well. Depends on what you, how, without doing a PhD, right? So a lot of people are preferring PhDs. A lot of people are doing a third masters, which might be a final degree called an MBA. Everything has become so interdisciplinary that it's completely up to you. Noel.
I'll just add to that. I think there are two reasons you should consider to do the Schwarzman program, and also two reasons why you shouldn't consider doing the Schwarzman program. I think number one, if you want to get the American college experience, and you think you cannot get into a Harvard or any other Ivy League, do the Schwarzman program. It will feel like you are in America. I can assure you that much. As long as you're inside that building, which is a palace, by the way, you will feel like you're in America. You won't even know you're in Beijing. That's number one. So if you want the experience, go ahead, do that. In America, they'll value the Schwarzman program just as much as they value a degree from Harvard University. The second reason is if you are adventurous, you want to travel, consider it a 10-month fully paid vacation across China. You will see things that as a tourist, most people will not see. I can guarantee you that much. Um, you can, of course, get firstly, as an Indian, getting a tourist visa to China is difficult. So forget about traveling to China as a tourist. Schwarzman program gives you that ability. In fact, if I'm not wrong, during the COVID year, I think 3 or 4 Indians were actually allowed to travel from India to China, and all of them
Us,
were Schwarzman scholars. Oh
us,
yeah, it was your
Noel,
batch,
us,
yeah, yeah, exactly. Like Shivakshi can
Jai
attest to
Shankar.
that.
Jai
Yeah,
Shankar had to get our visas approved, and we were the only ones who had traveled in the last 3 years to China, and we.
exactly. Like I mean, the Schwarzman College will call up the embassy and they'll call up the consulate in China, call up the foreign ministry in China, and be like, "Hey, get these people visas to come here." This is how prestigious the program is. Um, and I think most people in India haven't heard of the Tsinghua University, but just to point out, like if in China, and I think Shivakshi can attest to this, if in China you tell somebody you're from Tsinghua University, you get upgraded to a business class, most likely,
Yes.
on the plane. You will get invited to some person's house to eat lunch or dinner. Yeah, I think Shivakshi, I think you can attest to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And moreover, just to add to that, the experience of being in China from Tsinghua, forget Schwarzman even, just Tsinghua. Uh, you need to know we have China has a 4 billion population, and imagine all 4 billion or 5 billion people want to get into Tsinghua, and the acceptance rate is less than Harvard's. So 1 or 2 seats per province. So
Yeah.
it's highly difficult. It's one of the most difficult colleges to get into the world, not for foreigners, of course, but for Chinese people, and which is why um, you can use that name if you want to in a lot of places to get a lot of access and privilege, but also a lot of hate at times because you have gotten in and they haven't. So you need to navigate that space.
Yeah, and so in fact, I think Schwarzman College is actually called a concession, a modern day concession in China. But I think yeah, the Tsinghua University tag in China is an amazing thing. Like it's all IITs in India combined into one, and that is the level of reputation it has. Um, and it gives you access. And I think Schwarzman College gets you more access than even most Tsinghua colleges can get you access. Like I think only three or four people have actually visited the Tesla factory in Shanghai. I mean, excluding world leaders, and we were one of those people who got to visit the Tesla factory. If you're traveling in places like Gansu, Tibet, Xinjiang, Inner Mongolia, it's quite politically sensitive. You show your Tsinghua card, you get by. You can't do that as a normal traveler. Um, And I think also the people who are teaching you in Tsinghua University are like top of the class. My mentor, I think Dean Pan, Shivakshi, I think you can attest to this. Dean Pan is actually a student of Zhurongji. It's one of the top leaders of Chinese polity. Like he's revered almost as a god. So you're walking, you're sleeping, eating with some of the most powerful people in the world sometimes. And that's something of value. It might not pay off now, it might not pay off 10 years down the line, but it'll eventually pay off in some way or the other. And these are connections. They'll almost be like friends. You will have them in your WhatsApp connections and be like, hi, how are you doing? So if that matters, then yeah, great program. If it does not, then I think there's no real point to do the Schwarzman program. Do an MBA instead. Um, yeah, I think that's much better. Go to LSE, go to Harvard, go to the Ivy Leagues. It really depends on what you want to do. If China interests you, then yeah, this is the place.
Yes.
Great. We have a few more questions that came in at the very last minute, so I hope you don't mind taking those as well. There's someone who's a little worried because their transcripts don't indicate the GPA, the overall GPA. Instead, it only indicates the grade for every unit that they did as part of their degree. So they are wondering how they should be proving their grades in the application. Should they ask their recommenders to indicate an overall GPA based on the grade units, grades for each unit, or any suggestions? Do you think they'll have to go back to the university and ask them to provide a GPA?
I'm not sure actually. I think then the best alternative would be go to the university asking for
University and yeah,
GP. Yeah, or if they're not doing that, I think one way is to simply calculate it yourself, come up with an approximate number. I mean, if there's any discrepancy, you can talk about it later. They won't reject you on the spot, so don't worry about that.
because you're
Shivakshi.
submitting your transcript as an evidence, right? So you might be able to calculate it on your own. But for other, so because you have, if you are planning to apply this year, then this. Otherwise, if you're planning to apply next year, it's best for city any other scholarship to have a final GPA mentioned as a letter from your university as well. But for now, this might work.
Perfect. And just one final question. How many students get selected from India each year? Any statistics that you know about how many students from Northeast India in particular make it?
Yeah. So generally the total is 140 to 150, as we said. From that, there's no particular number of people from India being selected. If you see in my batch, we were 4 of us. And even though one was from, I wouldn't say American Indian, but has been studying in America for the longest time, but has an Indian passport. So 4 of us from India in my batch. The next batch, again, 4 to 5. But this year, for example, in the sense last year, there were just 2. So it often depends from what I have seen. 3 to 5 might be the number, but we are seeing as India is getting, I would say India-China relations are also key important. We have seen the number of people getting selected from India has also increased. So 4 to 5 is actually one of the largest numbers that you'll see apart from America and China being selected. So America has the highest number of candidates being selected, and then it's China. And the third we realized it was India in my batch. So 4 to 5 is a big number of getting selected from a country, because otherwise you'll find from Russia there are 2, or Bangladesh might be 1, or no. So there's no particular number of people, and particularly from Northeast. So for example, I have been, if I'm not wrong, I am the only person ever, yeah. Shubhajit was one person, but he was from Karnataka, Bangalore. I was the only person from Eastern India in whole. And when I'm saying Eastern India, that's Bihar, and I'm counting all these states. So yeah, there's no particular, they do not look at the states in particular for diversity. They're looking India holistically in terms of leadership and merit and other aspects, and your work.
Yeah. I think I'll just add, like, I think my batch had the most number of Indians at 7, but
Oh,
that
yeah,
came with a, yeah, but that came with a caveat that I think out of the 7, only 4 of us actually had studied and lived in India. I think the rest 3 had either had spent considerable amount of time outside or studied outside of India. So that's something that has to be taken into consideration. I was, I think, really recently having a conversation with the administration, and they really want to get more Indians in. I think Shivakshi is right. Like, Indians are considered the third biggest group after the Americans and Chinese, both of whom have reservation in a way. Like, I have quotas as the number of seats there. I think it's a 40-20 split.
Yes.
And next are Indians. They're definitely looking for more Indians, so do apply. And on this note, I just like to add that they're looking for diversity. And when I say diversity, they want people who've done the most unimaginable things. So if you're coming from a field that's not traditional international relations or not law, or it's not an engineering degree, even better. I think you have a higher rate of selection. So yeah, and I think coming from Northeast India, okay, so I think probably should not be saying this, but I think when they had the first South Indian Schwarzman scholar, they kind of marketed it as the first Schwarzman scholar from Southern India. Yeah, they did that. So I think if you're from the Northeast, I might increase your odds. No comment, but might increase your odds.
Yeah, might. But you get a lot of advertisements within India, by the way. Once you get through, there will be newspapers from West Bengal.
Yeah.
So for me, it was West Bengal. For some other people, it was Parsa, it was Kashmir, because you're the first one or a first woman to get into it. So there's a lot of like attention you get during that period of time when the results are out.
Yeah.
And it is a pretty prestigious scholarship, so understandably. Great, guys. I think that brings us to the end of the session. We've gotten through all questions, but of course, if you guys have any more questions that come up later, please don't hesitate to email Project Edu Access. You can drop us a line. If you're not a mentee at Project Edu Access, you can email us at info@projecteduaccess.com. But if you're a mentee with us, you know where to contact us. For those of you who are asking, the recording, once it's processed, will be available on our YouTube channel, and I've just dropped the link in the chat. So yeah, please head there maybe in the next 24 hours and you'll find the recording there. But even otherwise, if you're thinking about grad school applications this year, then you will find a lot of useful resources on this channel. So hit subscribe. But yeah, thank you again, Shivakshi and Noel, for patiently getting through all those questions and also giving us such a concise but comprehensive overview of what the scholarship application process entails.
Yeah.
We'll see
Thanks
you
a lot,
on.
Gayatri, for having
It was
us.
lovely.
Yeah. I'll just add one thing. I forgot to completely mention it. When I was applying for it, a lot of people asked me why China. And I think do not get discouraged by that question. Like, when you go to China, you'll realize why China. So yeah, I'll just end it there.
Perfect. Great. Thank you, everyone, and see you. Bye.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
guys.
Thank you. Good night.
Take care.
I think they were just saying take care.